So hello YouTube and Twitch. It's been a really long time since I've done anything anime related or anything in general uploaded to the channel. But with Evangelion Rebuild 4.0 being released a couple days ago, and people have been messaging me about it and asking me about my thoughts and everything, thought this would be the perfect time for me to get back, make a video for you guys and give my thoughts and some analysis of the movie and some critique and everything. And so let's get the shilling out of the way. I'd appreciate if you leave a comment, a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel and also to my Twitch, twitch.tv/ngamer3k. Alright, so let's get this started with the review. So if you don't know anything about me, I'm a big Evangelion fan, and that's probably one of my favorite anime series, if not the favorite anime series of mine. And I've done a lot of stuff and work regarding Evangelion and analyzing it and everything for YouTube and for the anime community and all that stuff. So I'm very heavily invested into the story and the characters and the process of how it was made and everything. So I'm pretty knowledgeable on that front. Now with that all being said, I thought this 4.0 or 3.0 plus 1.01 as it's officially called, I thought it was awful. I thought so 3.0 that I think unanimously everyone thinks is very, very bad. Like as a standalone movie, it's just bad. I mean, there's nothing more to say about it, honestly. It's just very inexplicably horrible in like a lot of respects, especially plot wise, and we'll get into how that like sort of continues in 4.0. But I want to start off with some positives of 4.0 before I really rail into it. So 4.0 in a lot of ways it resembles End of Evangelion a lot, which is both, it turns out to be both a good and a bad thing to me, and I'll get more into that as we get more into the actual ending of the movie and how it all wraps up. But the scenes that were really reminiscent and homages or close to what we saw in End of Evangelion, I thought were very well done. The action scenes were something that harkens back to the battles in End of Evangelion. The battle at the end with all the Evangelions, this right here was reminiscent of the End of Evangelion with the mass-produced Evas. So I thought that was really good, and also the parts, that were very psychological, I guess you would say, in End of Evangelion were sort of reproduced in 4.0. You saw things where there are flashbacks and everything. Let me find the image. Where is it? Here it is. So this part and the parts where they're kind of fighting, Shinji and Gendo are fighting, and you see like all the areas of the past, they're like sets, they're like movie sets, and that's like very similar to End of Evangelion, how it sort of breaks the fourth wall, acknowledging that this is like a piece of like culture art, something that's made up, something that is to be consumed, that is artificial, and it works on several levels, right? Because like I said, it's artificial in the sense that it's not real to us, but it's also like part of the way they visualize how the past or the different iterations of what could happen in the universes of Evangelion, how artificial they are within the characters' minds and everything. So I thought that was really well done. Everything else was pretty much terrible, but let's dive into more of... Let's just start, let's go in order, start to finish. First of all, the title, let's explain that. So the official title is Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.01, Thrice Upon a Time. So this basically confirms that the rebuilds are indeed like a continuation or like a different like a continuation of like multiple universes or whatever. So if we imagine the TV series as the first iteration, then the end of Evangelion, the movie, as the second. Now this is the third. So this is the third time that these characters have ended up this way, basically. Third time that Shinji has had to come to grips with everything that he has done and how that ties into the fate of the world and all that jazz. So from the very beginning, it was speculated that this was the case, and it is now confirmed that that is the case. So getting along with a lot of questions that were left unanswered for a very long time, like 3.0 just like jumped the shark with all this bullshit about like, because we were left in the dark for a really long time about everything, and a lot of it was answered in 4.0, this movie, but it wasn't answered in quite the right way, in my opinion. But we'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Anyway, so I thought the plot overall was just very inconsistent and didn't make much sense. Again, kind of the same with 3.0. 3.0 was just a mess, plot-wise and presentation-wise and everything. It just was bad, as mentioned before. 4.0 did a little bit better, but I mean not much, in my opinion. So we do get a lot of answers to like why things were in 3.0 in this one, but to me it all just, the culmination of everything, it just didn't work, and I'll get into more details. But I made a tweet about 4.0, and the very first thing I said was it's not fit for fans nor newcomers to this series. And what I mean by that is, like, especially by watching 4.0, it's hard to imagine anyone that was completely new to this series who had just been watching rebuilds to have watched 4.0 and really understand like anything, or really get much out of it. So that's one thing. And then for fans like myself, it was difficult for me to even follow a lot of the time. And then the things that like I didn't appreciate, like going back to newcomers for just a second, like, so parts more of the more ambiguous parts of the story were like spoon-fed explained to you during these rebuilds, especially in 3.0. Like Fuyutsuki basically explains to Shinji what Gendo's planning and how everything happened, and then also we have Kawaru kind of doing the same thing, explaining to Shinji exactly the events that took place. You have stuff like that, but then it just doesn't. Then they leave out some things, like explaining wise, where they could have took the time. Like if they were going to explain like all this, like why didn't they explain certain other things? I guess is my point. So as a newcomer, I can't imagine being able to follow this at all. And then as a fan, it's like I didn't really appreciate that they took the time to explain all that and then didn't really like take the time to really use the time that they gained from just explaining all that straight up to do something else that was great. They just kind of cobbled together like a bunch of other crap that didn't really relate to anything, and it didn't work. So okay, and along with that, so in this 4.0 movie, there is like a ton of fan service. There's a ton of callbacks to the original series and to End of Evangelion, which were very odd considering we hadn't seen anything like that in 3.0 really. Because in 1.0 and 2.0, it was pretty close to the original series, with only a few differences here and there. And I think the changes that they did make in 1.0 and 2.0 were very well done. I thought, like, in 2.0, for example, like how they presented, like, the dinner or the meal that Shinji wanted to have with his dad and, you know, everyone else. That was so well done. And that's something that's, like, very subtle in the original series, but it's brought to the forefront in a good way in rebuilds. So it's like that sort of thing that I'm talking about, where the stuff that they took the time to explain, they didn't really complement that with anything meaningful. So let's get into the actual movie now. So the first half with this part, I've been talking for, I don't know, 10 minutes, but we're getting right into the plot now. So the first half of the movie is like pure fan service. So I've already seen art on Twitter of this Rey in the hat and everything, and you see Shinji in Toji's like tracksuit, and then they later they dress up Rey in her old school uniform, and all these things. And to me, like, this part was like didn't really mean anything. It was like they were just trying to get like a rise out of fans, like, you know, trying to get fans on the good side before they like kind of like went crazy. Sure, it's establishing like the kind of the world of the post Third Impact, and which is appreciated a little bit, but again, they didn't really expand upon it like as much as they could have to mean something that was significant to the actual movie and to the actual overall story, because really everything that's meaningful happens at the end, because we still have Shinji not really doing anything during this time. which is kind of odd to me, given that in the third one, Shinji mentions to Kaoru specifically, like, he's concerned about his friends. He's concerned about Toji, he's concerned about Kensuke, etc. And then immediately he gets to the village, right? And he knows that they're okay. So that to me is like, that should get some sort of reaction out of him, but then he's still like, traumatized or whatever, and he spends several days not talking to anyone, not eating, etc. And then the whole part with Rei, the second Rei, as the audience is explicitly told that, she's kind of hardwired to be drawn to Shinji, and things like that. So, like, her interactions with Shinji, given that this is not the original Rei, this is just the second clone, and how she's kind of developing as her character, to me, it wasn't that meaningful because we know that it's just not real. You see, that's my point, though. It is for fan service and not relevant to the movie. So, like, it's just not. I don't know. They could have used the time for something else. So, I mean, this part is just not good. Okay. So, what's next? Okay, so then we get to the meat of what's going on. So after all this, Shinji reunites with Misato and all the crew on the Ville, or on the Wunder, as part of the Ville organization. We kind of learn what happened, which now the confusion really starts. Because, okay, even when he's in the village, Shinji learns that when he awakened the Evangelion, after that happened, that Kaji sacrificed his life in order to stop the complete third impact from happening. And this is never explained at all. We are just told simply, a life had to be sacrificed in order to stop the third impact. Okay. Sure. I guess that's how that works, I guess. And then this shot is kind of interesting because on this transport, Ville is already written there on the wing there. So that's kind of interesting. And so Kaji sacrifices himself. And this transport's in 3.0. Okay, whatever. Well, Kaji sacrifices himself, and that prevents the complete third impact from happening. So he basically, as we understand it, he saves a bunch of lives by doing that. We don't know why or how, but okay. So that is never answered. Which to me is really odd because it's like, that seems like a pretty big thing to not answer when you're gonna take the time to explicitly explain all this other bullshit. So there's that. Okay, and then the final battles and everything and all this stuff that happens. Um, so let's just focus on what's happening on the screen. So apparently the Nerve, they had this whole plan in Sele by extension, had this whole plan with the spears, and that would bring about an additional impact that would bring about the human instrumentality thing. But again, this isn't really explained that well or at all. We're told by Kaoru in the third one, sort of, how the spears are supposed to work, but again, he just says it, and then we're just supposed to like take it as like, you know, a point of fact where they don't really explain why or how these things work the way they do. And it's just all very confusing and doesn't make much sense. And admittedly, End of Evangelion is sort of like that too at some parts, but at least it's not like a huge major part of it. Whereas in this movie, it's like pretty emphasized to some degree, and it would be helpful to actually like know what they're talking about a bit without just, you know, having to make leaps of assumption. So, next thing. We finally learn about Asuka a little bit more, about why she has the eye patch. Bear with me here. So apparently she has one of those L containment things in her eye to stop her from becoming the ninth angel, I believe. Because, of course, in the second one, her Evangelion, the Unit 3 or 4, or whatever it is, turns into, or she gets possessed by the ninth angel, and her Eva unit gets possessed by it, and her and the Eva unit get turned into the ninth angel, and so that L containment pod thing in her eye like prevents that, so she removes that and then becomes the ninth angel or whatever to help fight in the final battle. Okay. Again, I don't really like this. They use this whole gimmick of like the Evangelions like gaining extra power by going berserk or becoming awakened like way too much in the rebuilds. And in the original series, it's like when they go berserk, it's like to show how the Eva units are biological, how they're monsters, how they are tied to humankind. But in this, they're just like, this is just like shonen bullshit. Like, okay, I'm gonna be powered up now. Like, because I need more power. So conveniently, here's a thing that gives me more power. That sort of thing. Yeah, so this whole thing with Asuka, this reveal with her eye, that's just no. Also, while we're on the subject of Asuka, we learn that she is a clone, much like Rei. So again, Thrice Upon a Time. This is the third iteration of the ending, and we are led to believe that there have been many Asukas before this Asuka, and that's why her name is different and everything. So this, I'm also, I don't know how I feel about this. This is just weird to me because now in this universe of Evangelion, okay, so her original Unit 2, I guess we're supposed to believe that the soul within her Unit 2 is the original Asuka's soul. Whereas in the original series, of course, it's her mom. And so that kind of, I don't know, it kind of takes away from the character a little bit for me. Because then she's basically like Rey. And now that I have kind of rewatched some parts of the movie, it's like she always refers to Rey as the original series. So I guess, Asuka's sort of like an improved, like, Rey clone, but she's Asuka. It's like she says in the original series, like, Unit 0 is the prototype, and AV Unit 1 is the test type. And then Unit 2 that's the real Evangelion. So she's kind of like the real first pilot. But I guess she is more like human than Rey is to some degree. So then, okay, the reason why this takes away from the character, right, is because she is basically motherless at this point. Like, we don't even know, her mom is not even really mentioned, or at all, as far as I'm aware. She still has that little doll that she plays with, but yeah, her mom is just not in the story, and that's just odd, considering the parental, like, overtones that go with, especially this film. I don't understand that that decision. I think it's just like kind of like something that they did, that Anno did, to just for the sake of doing it. I don't know, doesn't work. And then along with that, we finally learn who Mari is. So Mari is this character to Shinji's right here, to our left. So this is, from the very beginning, the fans, or at least I, was skeptical of this character. It's like, why does this character even exist? Why does there have to be, like, a fourth pilot? When these three characters, Shinji, Rei, and Asuka, are like so great on their own. Like, if you add a fourth character, what could she possibly contribute, right? And it seemed like just a way for them to like peddle merchandise and everything. And it took all these movies. Not until this movie did we actually learn anything about her. She literally did nothing the entire series. Okay, in the second one, they actually use her kind of where she takes the place of Asuka in the series during that battle with the angel. I thought that was actually pretty well done when they did that. They kind of swapped them, where Asuka takes the place of Toji, and then Mari takes the place of Asuka during those events. But then after that, in the third one, she does nothing, and in the fourth one, she basically does nothing up until the end, where we actually learn who she is. And I guess we're led to believe that she's this girl with the glasses here on the right in this picture, or she's a clone of this girl, rather. So she's another clone, I guess, and and she is kind of an agent of Gendo as well in Seele, and all that stuff. She's carrying out their plans, basically, or she is like a player, a pawn in their scheme. Okay, I mean, that's all well and good, but then until the ending, which we'll get to a bit later here. But yeah, this big reveal didn't quite do it for me. It was pretty underwhelming. Because I think they show this picture earlier too. And it's like earlier in the films. And it's like, maybe she kind of looks similar. So it's not hard to like draw that comparison. Well, I mean, see, that's the thing. Like, Kaji is always like an enigmatic figure. In the series, he's like a triple agent, right? Like, he kind of works for everybody. He kind of works for UN, he works for Seele, he works for Nerve. And in this one, his role is a bit more defined, I suppose. But it's like her, like... Yeah, he does bring the key of Nebuchadnezzar to him. So it's like, the way I understood it is like, yeah, she's just there as, like I said, a pawn of whatever scheme Seele had. Regardless of whether her actions during this movie, this iteration of the universe, like, contradicted anything or went against any of their plans, is whatever, because it doesn't like seem like anything that happened, any agency that she had a lot of impact. Which brings me to the ending, right? Let's just talk about the ending now, because it involves Mari. So the ending, was kind of confusing to me. Like, the ending overall I thought was okay, just because it's like, after all this shit that happens in these movies, it's hard to imagine the ending being any other way than how they did it. Which is admirable, I suppose, in some way. But at the same time, the ending is essentially like Shinji and Mari like hook up. And it's like, what is that about? Like, I just don't understand. Like, there's like nothing like between these characters, like tangible, that we can see throughout the movies, unless I'm missing something. Like, at least from Shinji's point of view, Mari is just, I don't know. She's just like that. But the way that they had the world at the end, I thought that was appropriate. World without Evangelions. They've grown up. We don't really know if there is a time skip there or not. Or I think when I rewatched that part, it seemed like they instantly went to that instance at like the train station. So it seems like there was no time skip. They were just at those ages, instantly, whatever. And that's how Shinji like decided to like build the world or whatever. But the whole thing with them like being a couple or being together makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. from what I gathered watching the movie. So I just don't understand that. It's like, it's not even like that I want Shinji to be with Asuka or something like that. It's just that there is like no reason why Shinji has any sort of feelings for this random character Mari, which she does nothing throughout the entire series, and has basically no interaction with Shinji. So yeah. What's the next thing I have? Oh yes. So then we're finally before this, right? We get an explanation, more in-depth look into Gendo. So we kind of learn about his past a bit more, and everything. This part was sort of interesting. However, if you're a fan of the series and like, you know, a nodule fan like myself, you kind of know all this stuff already about him. This is just kind of more explicitly explained a bit more. You know, the impact that Yui had on him, and how he kind of is the same as Shinji. And we kind of see all of that in flashbacks from the series. So this whole part wasn't really a huge revelation, which is okay. I mean, the way they handled it was serviceable, but it didn't really add anything meaningful than what we already knew. So during this whole thing, which brings me to another very confusing part, and along with my theme of like this movie and its plot being very inconsistent. So during this whole thing, right, like Gendo realizes, you know, how his relationship with Shinji, how he kind of mistreated him, and how Yui's legacy is sort of Shinji, and that he should have took the time to be a good father to Shinji for Yui's sake and all of these things, and how he fucked up basically with that. And again, this is sort of like this is stuff we already kind of know from the series and End of Evangelion, because in the End of Evangelion, once Gendo initiates all the stuff that needs to happen for the Human Instrumentality Project, Yui rejects him. You know, she doesn't want Gendo's plan to come to fruition in the way that he wants it to be. You know, she kind of reveals to him the error of his ways and all of that in that movie. So it's like this whole part with Gendo is sort of like the same thing. And so like I was saying, so Gendo realizes like he should have been a better father to Shinji, because Shinji is Yui's legacy. Okay, that's all well and good. So this, we are led to believe, right, like I was saying earlier, how like there's a really big like parenting sort of theme going on in this movie, even more so than the original series, I would say, the way they emphasize it in this movie. The way how Kensuke, he explicitly tells Shinji, you know, you have to talk with your father and all these things, or you'll regret it. And so he talks with him, and, you know, that's how kind of the final battle like takes place, and how we get to this epiphany. So Gendo realizes, you know, he should have been a better father. Okay. You know, he wasn't there for Shinji, and that's like partly the reason why all this crap had to happen. But on the flip side of that, we have Misato, who has a kid apparently with Kaji. So they have a son, and she decides that she is just not going to be in his life at all. So their kid, who's also named Kaji, has no knowledge of his parents, we're told. And that just completely contradicts that. The whole Gendo thing, right? Like, so what's that about? I mean, I just don't understand the interplay between those relationships. Like, what could Ano possibly have been thinking there? I mean, I don't really understand that. So that to me was like probably the biggest thing, the biggest problem I had with it. Like those two plot points do not commingle, do not synergize very well. All right. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the production. So the CG was bad overall. Like, okay, you can't tell me that this looks good. This looks horrible. Like the other CG parts, you know, with the Avas and their weapons and everything, those looked fine, pretty good. But this part with the Ray, yeah, that it looks horrible. And even some of the parts where they're at the end, where specifically where Gendo is fighting Shinji and their Avas, those also don't look good. Yeah, I mean, is it supposed to look bad? Like, that's like, I had the same thought. Blank had the same thought when we're doing it. Like, maybe it's supposed to look bad because, you know, that's like sort of a thing. But I don't know. We don't know, really. Like, do we even know? Like, we don't know. We don't know what Crazy Ano's thinking. We don't. I don't know. It just it's just ugly. But yeah. So, and then okay, so I watched the dub, and the dub, all the voice actors did a good enough job. I don't want to like bash the voice actors, because whenever there's a bad like English version or dub version, it's pretty much impossible to blame the voice actors a lot of the time. You have to blame the English direction or the director, and they fucked up. There's like inconsistency with the pronunciations of some of the names and terms, and the audio seemed to be off in places, and yeah, it just wasn't good. And so yeah, overall the product was not good. It was probably rushed. So I mean, that doesn't really excuse them, you know, like they should have, you know, whatever the circumstances were, like whoever was at fault there should have been something where they had the right resources to make a good product. And there was one thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so we learned that Asuka, so Asuka So in the original series, of course, Asuka and Shinji are kind of like attracted to each other. So in this one, Asuka like admits that she kind of had a crush on Shinji or whatever, but apparently like she's over that, and what we're led to believe is that she like likes Kensuke now, or something, which again comes like right out of left field, like for no reason. So like she calls him Ken Ken. So in Japan, like you don't call someone by first of all their first name, let alone a nickname, unless you're like really really close to them or you consider them close to you. And so she calls him by a nickname, and so by that we can gather that she is close to him, at least from her perspective. And so there's something there as far as from her side. But the thing about that is like during the movie, it doesn't seem like she really treats him that, too differently in a way that like would point to like true affection, other than her calling him that. That the Japanese voice direction was a father-daughter relationship. Okay, well that's... I don't know. Even so... What? That doesn't make sense given that she calls him a nickname. I don't know. But, and even if that was the case, it's like, why didn't they explain that? Like, why didn't they, like, delve further into that? Because that would have been really interesting. But of course, that doesn't go anywhere. So that's another thing that just was odd. So when you have something like this that is in production for so goddamn long, like, it can never turn out good. It just can never turn out good. There's so many examples of this, and this is no exception. And at the end of the day, it's like you have to ask yourself, was this worth nearly 10 years of waiting from 3.0 to 4.0? And the answer has to be objectively no. Like, obviously, like, you want to judge this movie by its own merit as a standalone movie, without any of that sort of factor coming into play. But with this, it is so hard to ignore that factor. We had to wait so long, and especially being that the third movie was so bad. It was so bad. Like, we were expecting something really, really great, and that was not good enough. So there you go. That's my off-the-cuff review of 4.0 or 3.0 plus 1.01 Evangelion Rebuild 4, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I didn't really like it. I rewatched the third one to prepare, to watch the fourth one. And after the third one was so bad, like, I watched the third one, like, almost the day it was released in Japan. And I had not watched it since then. And, after rewatching it again in English this time, because I watched it in Japanese the first time, of course, I didn't really think it was as bad as I remember it to have been. But it was still bad. And then this one was not much better.